animal welfare. All I can say is that every time a big truck drives by with pigs inside of it, I do cry, and they look very sad.
Can you tell me what the Farm Bill is?
Nope. Farm Bill? Yeah, nope.
Animal welfare? Well, I assume that's when an animal family is below the poverty line and receives additional support from the government. So the Farm Bill is the man who has worked on the farm for 80 years.
Tell me, what do you know about Proposition 12 in California?
Oh, nothing.
I know nothing about that. I'm so sorry. Animal welfare, like how they take care of the animals. You know, agricultural and food things.
I don't know what the Farm Bill is.
Welcome back, everyone, to Contemporary Issues in Agriculture Podcast, or CAP for short. My name is Sidney Schnor, and today I'm with my co-host,
Dr. MK, popularly, that's what I'm known for, but my name is Fally Masambuka-Kanchewa.
All right, so we are here to kick off Season 2 of the CAP Pod, and to have a super warm, awesome welcome, Dr. MK and I are going to discuss Season 2, just to have a nice little introduction for everyone. So, okay, are you ready?
Sure, I am.
Okay, awesome. So, Dr. MK, what do you think makes this podcast important?
Yeah, that's a good question. So maybe for some of you who are just joining us and you're new to the podcast, like Sidney said, this is Contemporary Issues in Agriculture podcast, and I am the instructor for this course. Me and Sidney work together, and maybe if you also don't know Sidney, Sidney is a PhD student who is working with me on different projects, and she's one of the instructors for the course as well. So, your question about what makes this podcast important, right? So, the main thing, for me, is really trying to get students to engage with people who share different views and different opinions. So, what makes it important is that it helps in cultivating that active listening spirit. You know, when you think about agriculture and especially the contemporary issues in ag, most of the times people argue, people fight, and everybody wants to be right. Rarely do we have time to just listen to someone and understand where they're coming from. So yes, through this podcast, I feel it's so important to allow everybody's voices to be heard, whether they believe in things that some other people don't find valuable or they have questions about, but it really provides that opportunity for different people to share their knowledge. But also, most importantly, it provides the opportunity for the students to just listen and then appreciate the differences in perceptions, the differences in opinions that people share.
Even from the instructor side, and, being your TA, I feel like I've learned a lot from our students, just the perceptions that they bring in and what they know from their lives, which is also valuable experience and knowledge, and what our guest speakers spoke about and those views. I learned so much from our guest speakers.
You're right, because even me, I learned so much. And that's the thing, it really makes me, even as an instructor, to reflect and really see myself learning, because there'll be some other things I thought, I know, I've done research about this, but, you hear people's perspectives, you hear some people who have experience in the field share these opinions, and just to sit there and be humble, to listen, it's been amazing. I have really learned a lot. I feel me and the students, all of us are learning in the process. It's hard. One thing that, and this is something that I wanted our listeners to really appreciate, is that it's not an easy thing for our students to go through this, because they may wish to know a little bit of the background that most of the students we have. They have a strong connection, personal connection with agriculture. And these students have had their lives thinking that everybody is really working against agriculture. So to really have them step out and have this conversation, listen to somebody maybe share something that they don't believe in, I just want our audience to appreciate that it takes a lot of humility and growth on the part of our students.
Yeah, could not agree more with that. With that, what are you the most excited about for this new season?
I think I'm so excited about it because you and me have talked about this, Sydney, for most part. Like, we are so excited because we've seen so much growth. So last season was our first season. So there was so much trial and error there. There's some things we learned in the process. But what is exciting about this season is that we are looking forward not only to have the interviews or conversations featured, but we're also looking forward to having our students reflect. We want our audience to appreciate, what did it take for our students to come to where they go to be, what did it take them for them to sit down and have that interview, to talk to that person. So it'll be more like an oral reflection. Sometimes in class we have those written reflections, but this season will be exciting because we plan to be like coming to you bi-weekly. So bi-weekly we'll be bringing new episodes, but towards the end of the month we'll have maybe some of the students that were featured in that previous podcast or in one of our podcasts just share like how did it feel for them, to be there, so that the audience can appreciate the growth and even the sacrifices that our students make to be here and have these conversations.
Yeah. They put a lot of effort into those podcasts. I'm the editor, so I have to listen to the podcast and the grader. Mm-hmm. So, and I say have to in the kindest way possible because they were fascinating and I learned a lot from them.
So maybe Sidney, can you share more about that? Like for you, from the grader's perspective, and from what's your opinion about the podcast?
Yeah. So I was a part of the process this time, and I was not a part of the class process the year prior. And with the learning of how to host a podcast and how to do episodes and edit, coming from learning how to edit a podcast to make a full podcast episode, they all did amazing. It was fantastic. They didn't really need much from me at all. They just took it and ran. Mm-hmm. So just being able to be there to help work out some of the kinks for myself in the future was fun and challenging at the same time, to learn how to do that from the instructor side. Mm-hmm. I knew what I was doing, but to be able to tell someone else how to do it was something that I learned how to do through that.
Yeah, Sidney, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's another thing that our audience also have to understand. Unlike the professional podcast that you listen to, this podcast is really an opportunity for students to learn. So I feel like the audience also should know that the focus of this is not really about them to produce high quality work in terms of the technical part of it, the technical part of the podcasting, but it's about the topics, being able to hold those conversations, So if the audience can take away one thing, it's like we are not really a class that emphasizes more on the technical part of it. Sidney, as a producer, is the one who works behind the scenes, because it's too much work for the students to think through the interviews, to think through who to talk to, and then all the work they have to go through in one semester to come up with this podcast. It's something that we have decided to prioritize, to say they are more about the content, and then the technical part of the podcasting is where Sidney is the one who's doing a great job trying to piece all the things together. And if you hear anything that is there, our producer is Sidney, and she's really doing an amazing job to put all these things together, because most of our students have never done a podcast before when they come to this class. So it's a lot of work, learning how to interview people, learning to listen, and then to add on to come up with the podcast is really something that is not easy for them. So we kind of lessen the burden as much as we can and have Sidney provide that technical guidance there.
Yeah, and I was mostly just thinking about the technical side when you asked me that, but the question development for students, that was a large area of growth, and I wouldn't say that I'm perfect at it either, making sure to answer open-ended questions that remove any sort of bias, and that was something that we worked with the students with a lot, and not in a negative way. Everyone ended up doing a really great job, but it's hard to assess yourself and say, oh, was that a loaded question with some bias in it? But the students ended up doing awesome. And that, to tack on to what you asked, that was another area of from the instructor side, that was something that I was learning along with them to instruct at the same time.
Yeah. Sure, and I think, Sydney, you have really touched on a very important point, because that's another important aspect of this course. We really are teaching the students to know how to ask the right questions, because you get the answers based on the questions you have asked. And especially, like I said, some of the students have a strong connection to agriculture, and sometimes it's easy for you to ask leading questions, to ask double-barreled questions, but we are teaching them that they should be able to ask questions that are not double-barreled, questions that are open-ended, that will allow the people that they're speaking to share their minds. So that's really another very important aspect. If you ask, like, what are students learning from this class? What are they gaining from this? Like, if you could appreciate those skills, that's something that we're trying to develop in the students.
Yeah. To jump off of that, what kind of changes do you think listeners should expect with this new season?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it a little bit, that this time around, unlike the previous season, we're not just going to be providing you with these conversations that the students had, but we also have an opportunity to talk to some of the students just to share their experience when they went through the podcast interviewing, and, how they felt like after they produced the podcast, just to have them share their experience, and, for you to appreciate the behind the scenes, some of the struggles that they may have gone through, how they overcame them, and how they felt when they saw that finally their podcast was produced and published, I should say, as well.
Yeah. I have just a few more questions for you. So how do you think this season reflects the evolving conversations around contemporary issues in agriculture? Like, obviously, that's what our podcast is about, but how do you think this season is particularly sound with these newer conversations, right? Like, a year has passed. So what do you think about the evolving conversations we're having?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. It's an evolving conversation, but at the same time, I also feel like the contemporary issues in agriculture are kind of similar. They are evolving, but it's just the difference in the emphasis, because there are issues of climate change, but it's just like, okay, what are you talking about right now when you talk about climate change, right? Mm-hmm. What are the things that we're trying to look at? Talk about GMOs, talk about animal warfare. They're the same conversation, but they're just changing the focus, Mm-hmm. And one thing that really is evolving, because people, the audience should also understand that this podcast really is based on what are the current issues at that point. So that's one thing that people have to bear in mind as they're listening to the students have this conversation, because most of the topics that they picked were the topics that were really current during the time that they were trying to come up with this podcast. So maybe for the people to appreciate, we have these podcasts recorded in the fall. So for some of us, that's between August and December. So these were some of the issues that were really hot issues at that point that the students were talking about. But you'd also see, if you can reflect and see some of the topics that the students covered in the previous season, you see that, they're similar, but you can see that the angle is also different, So we have a lot of really big conversations that the students address. Some of them, you listen to the podcast and you go like, oh my goodness, what is going on? Because some of the issues are still going on. Some of the issues have not been fully addressed, and there's still ongoing debate in the public among people about those issues. So yes, we are evolving, but at the same time, the evolution is not we're not evolving in a drastic way. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? It's not like it's a dramatic thing that is happening, but it's just like we're adding layers. I think that should be the word I should use. There are more layers and layers that are being added to. The conversations seem to be the same, but they're just changing the angle and the direction that the students are focusing on. And that also brings back to the power of creativity, because you can have an issue, and that's another thing that is emphasized in this class, teaching the students to look at issues from different angles. It can be the same issue, but everybody can look at it from a different angle, and depending on the perspectives that are shared, it's also different. So yes, the issue may be the same, but we have different perspectives and different angles that the issues are being addressed or discussed from.
Yeah, and even from a policy perspective, with an example would be the pipeline, right? The carbon pipeline. There's always just little changes that happen, because those things are slow turning, where it may not be right now, it may not be this season or next season, but they're changes happen all the time, but they're small, but they add up, and they do make big changes. But the angles, when we were working with the students, I thought a lot about, like in a movie where it's a bunch of people at a newspaper and they're all running around going like, well, what's the angle? What's the take? That's kind of how I felt with the students, where it was like, okay, but what direction are you taking this? Like, you can talk about X, Y, and Z, but what makes that different? What perspectives are you trying to bring to the table? Not necessarily positive or negative perceptions of something, but like the different facets around a topic. That was probably one of my favorite things, was going around to the different students working. Felt like we were running a big old newspaper.
and to be honest with you, really that's exciting, because that's another thing I did learn from this time with the students. Because at first, I think the first time that the student had taken the class and thinking about, you're going to come up with a podcast, you interview somebody, people were interested to talk about things they were passionate about. But one thing I feel like most of the students grew from in this class is like, they discover, like, if I'm too passionate about this, I'll be biased. So I loved that there are so many students who at first proposed different topics that they were really passionate about, and then when they discover that they have to be neutral about those issues and not provide their thoughts or opinions, they would come back and say, no, I feel like I'm going to be too emotional about this. So, yeah, that emotional awareness part of it, because that's another objective of this class, is really to help the students develop and mature emotionally, to know, like, be socially aware, like, can I go into this territory? Am I going to be biased or not? So really just having those students and say, oh my goodness, I chose this topic, but I'm going to change it because I don't think I'm going to be neutral. So that was really exciting. And I think that's the thing that's evolving, because I think at first students are like, I just want to do something that I like. But now the students are like, nope, I know I'm passionate about this, but because I'm too passionate about it, I'll be biased, So that's a huge thing that I noted, I don't know. What are your thoughts about that, Sidney?
If I was a student in our class, if I was their age, like backtrack to being in that spot, I would have probably chose GMOs, and I know I would have been way too passionate about it. My parents, they definitely, like, I just would say a whole bunch of stuff, and they'd be like, you need to calm down just a little bit. It is like 8:30 in the morning. I would have definitely chose something that I was way too passionate about. So, and seeing that from the instructor side, it does to take and there's something to be said about putting your soul and your passion and your heart in something. But when you're trying to be unbiased, it takes a lot more out of you to take that step back. So I think there's a lot of value in that, and learning that takes a lot, because I still don't think that I'm perfect at it either.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even me, I'm still learning, There's sometimes you feel, oh my goodness, I didn't know I was so passionate about that. And you catch yourself doing that all the time. And if the students can do that quickly, to say, no, I cannot talk about this because I want to be really unbiased, that's growth. That's emotional intelligence there, Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes practice.
Yep.
Takes lots of practice. Okay, well, I will bring us to our last question. I promise, your last question.
So you didn't tell me you're going to be interviewing me. I thought this was going to be a conversation between you and me, Sidney.
It's a little bit of both. So, how can listeners engage with us or share their thoughts about the topics that we're discussing over the course of the season?
Yeah, sure. So you can put your comments, and remember, be nice and sensitive to these kids.
Please, I'll cry.
We don't want to break them. We are trying to build them. So we talk about emotional intelligence, emotional awareness. You can share your comments, but be mindful. These are just kids who are trying to find their space and try to share their experience. So be mindful of that. These are not professionals who have mastered this art. Like we said, they may have some sound issues, whatever. We're not really emphasizing so much on that, but we just want them to be out there and just see that the work is being appreciated by people. So if you can share your thoughts, send them some thumbs up, appreciate what they're doing, that would be amazing. But also, I'm so sure Sidney always provides our email address. We provide you guys to communicate with us and share with us your input. You can always do that. Me and Sidney welcoming all the feedback. And even if you guys feel like, oh my goodness, that topic was really something that I would love to jump in and share. We are open. I mean, we'll just check our schedules, but just give us time. We can always have you guys over as well and talk about the issues that are really burning. As long as we maintain what this podcast is about, because we're all about making sure that all voices are heard. So we are not promoting one particular voice. Our aim here is to make sure that every voice is heard. So if you have somebody who say, I'm passionate about this topic and I want to talk about it, we'll say, okay, we'll have to find another person who also shares a different view, because we want to have both views shared in this podcast. So that's what I would say. We are open to engagement. We are open to people contacting us and asking questions. But most importantly, let's be mindful as we give comments that these are the students who are just learning, and we should be kind to them.
Yeah. With that, thank you so much, Dr. MK, for joining us today. And thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you turning into the CAT podcast and joining us for this week's episode and many, many episodes to come. So we look forward to sharing our new stories, issues, and perspectives with all of you throughout the new season. Thank you for coming back to the CAT podcast. To email us with any comments, questions, or concerns, please send us an email at contemporary@iastate.edu.